Welcome back to our continuing coverage of UFC 223. We are standing outside the Barclays Center here in Brooklyn, New York, aka the epicenter of the mixed martial arts world over the past 36 or so hours. This has been an unbelievable week. Dare I say, the most newsworthy, craziest, stunning, unbelievable, dizzying week in the history of mixed martial arts. We are going to attempt to make sense of it all here on this quote-unquote MMAfighting.com preview show, but it's not going to be your typical preview show because, quite frankly, we're still digesting it all. We still don't know exactly what happened over the past 24 or so hours. We still can't quite make sense of it, but we're going to try. So first off, once again, I'm Ariel Helwani. That is our own Danny Segura. Danny, I don't even know what to say. I may have officially hit the wall. It is Friday night. UFC 223 is less than 24 hours away, Danny. And before I get to you, I feel like I need, at least for the audience and maybe for both of us, let's try to run down the timeline of events that got us to this exact moment, all right? Buckle up for this one. Last Thursday, 8 days ago, Tony Ferguson on the Fox lot in Los Angeles doing interviews, the Colin Cowherd show, tweaks his knee, ends up being a serious knee injury, may or may not need surgery. But what we found out 3 days later to be exact, on Easter Sunday, was that the knee injury was serious enough to rule him out of UFC 223. The original main event for Saturday night's card, Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Tony Ferguson, for the fourth time now, had been canceled. So the UFC went into emergency mode. They reached out to Eddie Alvarez. They reached out to Brian Ortega. In the end, though, they reached out to Max Holloway, and he took the fight. Well, Max Holloway, who is the reigning defending UFC featherweight champion, had some weight to cut and was also getting over a pretty serious ankle injury. Of course, he was supposed to fight at UFC 222, and he suffered a serious ankle injury in February, and that ruled him out of the Frankie Edgar fight. He was hoping to return in July, but of course he took this opportunity. Okay, so we start taking that in on Monday. Tuesday, Holloway, Khabib are here. We're starting to hear reports about how much Holloway is weighing. He's cutting weight. We get to Wednesday, and we spoke at the press conference on Wednesday. It's an amazing scene in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. They're going back and forth. It's fun. But we did talk about the fact that maybe Max Holloway looked a little bit out of shape, breathing heavily. But okay, we're hopeful that things will, resolve themselves come Friday. Thursday, UFC holds its media day inside this very arena, the Barclays Center here in Brooklyn. It's about to wrap up. Everyone's happy with their content at the face-offs. It was a great day. We got some good interviews. Ally Quinta, by the way, didn't have a sign. He drew a nice little Raging Al sign, getting ready for his Paul Felder fight, of course. And then we get word that Conor McGregor has arrived. And Conor McGregor is here with around 10 or so of his close friends, teammates, training partners. And then we find out that Conor McGregor and his team went to the loading dock, which is essentially underneath where we're standing right now, and they've surrounded one of the fighter buses that is holding the red corner fighters like Rose Namajunas, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Ray Borg, Michael Chiesa, Ally Quinta, Karolina Kowalkiewicz, and others, and pandemonium ensues. Chairs are thrown, dollies are thrown, guardrails are thrown. Michael Chiesa suffers lacerations on his face as a result of an object that is thrown. The window, he's sitting inside the minibus, and he is sent to the hospital later on and eventually ruled out of his fight against Anthony Pettis. Ray Borg has glass enter his eye, suffers multiple cuts on his cornea, goes to the hospital. He is then ruled out of his fight against Brandon Moreno. Rose Namajunas, who is fighting on Saturday against Yoani and Jacek, she is visibly shaken. She is emotionally distraught, but she decides to stay on the card. Well, tons of footage emerges. It's very clear what happened. It is not a good scene for everyone, including Conor McGregor and some of his friends. All right, we get to Thursday night. We get to around 10:30. Conor McGregor turns himself in. He does so with a friend of his, Keen Cowley. They both turn themselves in just a few blocks from here, 78th Precinct in Brooklyn, New York. And they're both facing multiple charges. They stay overnight in police custody at the 78th Precinct Friday morning, they are transported to the Kings County Courthouse just a few blocks away here in Brooklyn. In the meantime, while Conor McGregor is literally being transported out of the police station in handcuffs, the UFC 223 official weigh-ins are going on. And what is happening during the weigh-ins? We get word, first off, that Max Holloway has been deemed medically unfit to fight, pulled from UFC 223. So now Khabib Nurmagomedov loses another opponent. Then we find out that Anthony Pettis, who was not planning on fighting after Michael Chiesa was ruled out of his fight, is going to show up, make weight, and attempt to fight Khabib Nurmagomedov on 24 hours notice. Anthony Pettis shows up. He weighs 155.2, and then we start to find out that he's not going to come back to make weight again, and there might not be a title fight. He might not be on the card. Negotiations go awry. Anthony Pettis is gone. Then we find out that the UFC has called upon Paul Felder, who's scheduled to fight ally Quinta. However, the New York State Athletic Commission says, we don't like this matchup because of the rankings discrepancy. Paul Felder can't fight Khabib Nurmagomedov tomorrow night. And then we find out that ally Quinta, New York's own ally Quinta, is taking this fight on 24 hours notice. The lone New York-based UFC fighter, certainly the most popular one, who has yet to fight in his home state after everything he's been through. Raging ally Quinta, a disciple of Matt Serra, who 11 years ago tomorrow shocked the world and defeated George St. Pierre at UFC 69. Raging ally Quinta is now fighting Khabib Nurmagomedov on essentially 24 hours notice. However, he weighed 155.2 with his underwear. So we find out that Khabib Nurmagomedov is eligible to win the official lightweight title, but not ally Quinta. Fast forward to the ceremonial weigh-ins just moments ago inside this arena, and Dana White announces that the UFC will recognize ally Quinta as the champion if he pulls off the impossible and beats Khabib Nurmagomedov, sort of a people's champion, if you will. If you didn't think that the lightweight division title picture was confusing enough, it just got a hell of a lot more confusing. And in the midst of all of that, Conor McGregor emerges at the courthouse at around 3:30 or so Eastern time. He is arraigned. He is set free on a $50,000 bail, which was put in by Dylan Dennis, of all people. His training partner, Keen Cowley, also released on a $25,000 bail, and they are set for their next hearing on June 14th back here in Brooklyn. So, UFC 223 now will continue with 9 fights. It started with 13. It had 13 as recently as yesterday. It's now 9 fight deep, and the main event is Khabib Nurmagomedov versus ally Quinta for the UFC lightweight title. We think. That's what we're told.
Right.
And this is unbelievable stuff. I have never experienced anything like this. I feel like I ran it all down. Did I miss anything, Danny?
No, I think you did a pretty good job. Didn't mention the fact that it was April Fool's on Sunday, which just added, chaos to the whole situation. But yeah, this is such a bizarre weekend. Like, I'm still trying to process it. I'm like on 3 hours of sleep. I haven't had like a formal meal in a bit. Just trying to cover the news. I mean, just trying to keep up, really. It's been so much news breaking. Not even every single day, just every hour something new comes up.
Casey Nestor are trying to tell me something. Tell me. Artem Lobov, of course. I was bound to miss something. Danny, you're supposed to remind me of this stuff. Artem Lobov was also supposed to fight on Saturday against Alex Caceres, and of course he was seen in the incident with Team McGregor and the bus, and once that was apparent, the UFC pulled him from the card, so Alex Caceres was left opponentless as well. Dana White, though, did mention that all the fighters who were affected by this will be paid their show money. We presume Artem Lobov, not one of those fighters. We're talking about the Chiesas and the Pettises and the Felders of the world. Ray Borg, of course. Brandon Moreno. We don't know what Artem Lobov's status is. Of course, we don't know Conor McGregor's status. We're assuming he's not going to be cut, but that is an important note, so thank you for that. Now here we are, 24 hours away from an unbelievable Rocky story. I mean, this is the Rocky of all Rocky stories. This is ally Quinta getting an opportunity to fight on 24 hours against Khabib Nurmagomedov. A couple of months ago, Quinta told me on the MMA Hour that he wouldn't fight this guy for $1 million, $2 million. And now here he is on the verge of pulling off one of the greatest upsets in UFC history. What kind of a chance do you give ally Quinta?
It's funny because a lot of people have stepped in to fight Khabib Nurmagomedov, and we've all been like, perhaps that person doesn't have the best chance. But for some reason, Quinta is a pretty compelling matchup. We mentioned Max Holloway, a striker, not a wrestler. Paul Felder, a striker, not a wrestler. Anthony Pettis, a striker, not a wrestler, but now you got Quinta, who does everything well. He's super well-rounded. He's got really good boxing. His wrestling's on point. He's a very strong guy as well. Obviously, he's facing Khabib, who's a killer. So, I mean, probably his chances are not good, but I favor his chances better than the Paul Felder or the Anthony Pettis matchup.
One thing that cannot be overlooked is the fact, as Khabib mentioned at the press conference after the ceremonial weigh-ins, at one point throughout this entire 6-day stretch, Khabib Nurmagomedov thought he was going to fight 5 different people. Yeah. And on top of that, he was the target of this, mini bus attack, if we want to call it that. It's a lot of distractions for a guy on the verge of fighting for a belt for the first time in his career. Do you think that any of this is affecting him based on what you've seen from him over the last couple hours?
I don't, because just the way he carries himself, he's so stoic. I got a chance to, meet him in person, when he came in the studio in the MMA hour, and he's just the same. He's just constant the whole time, and I believe him when he says he didn't really feel anything. He talked to you and he said he thought the incident was funny, while to some some people were really shaken up by the whole Conor McGregor incident. And he really wants this. This has been a long road. Remember, that guy's 25-0 and he still hasn't had a UFC title shot. So for no reason he was going to back out of this one unless he was heavily injured. So all these, sure, they're side distractions, but at the end of the day, Khabib's on a mission and it's Khabib time.
I feel like the UFC truly made lemonade out of lemons here, because if they couldn't get the Ferguson fight, if they couldn't get Holloway, which always kind of felt a little bit off, considering the weight cut and, of course, the ankle injury, which can affect you trying to make weight. Here you have the local guy story. I mean, with all due respect to Paul Felder and Anthony Pettis, and you feel for them, you truly do. They're teammates. They're not going to fight each other. It feels like Quinta is the best case scenario. He's a guy who is going to make weight. He was going to fight. He's fighting in his, home turf, so to speak. This feels like the best case scenario. It's not what they wanted, but I feel like they actually, pulled a rabbit out of their hat here. This is, chicken salad out of chicken expletive. Do you agree with that?
100%, and they've been doing this since Sunday. I mean, just the fact that they put together a super fight between Khabib Nurmagomedov and Max Holloway, that in itself was a really good fix. I mean, I didn't really see too many people bummed out about that fight. In fact, people were actually excited, especially as the week went on. But in this one, I'm actually surprised they actually left him as the last option. They went to Anthony Pettis first and then Paul Felder, because I think this is actually the best possible scenario. Not counting obviously Tony Ferguson and Max Holloway. And here you have a guy that for people tuning in to the press conference, I mean, people were cheering. People were cheering for Quinta, and he's a fan favorite, and this is again such a bizarre situation that it kind of makes it interesting, because you kind of want to see how everything turns out after everything that we've been through. So yeah, the UFC did a pretty good job at putting this together, and I mean, they took so many hits this card. I mean, they don't even have a UFC Fight Pass preliminary card, and they've just been fixing holes. I mean, Dana White was really on the forefront of everything. Getting his face out there, explaining the situation. They really did their best job, and I think this is the best possible scenario.
Who wins?
Between the main event? I think it Khabib. I think it's obvious that he has to be the favorite. I mean, he's been training for this hard. He's been training for a 25-minute fight, and Quinta is not. He's training for a 3-rounder. So that obviously has some implications to it. Plus, just the fact that I feel like Khabib's just at a different level. This guy is just at a different level. And I mean, Quinta even said it himself when he went on your show a while back. He's like, I'm not fighting that guy. Did you see what he did to Edson Barbosa? And he was pretty open about that. So, I'm sure he'll make the best of it, go in there, put an exciting fight, and try his best. But at the end of the day, Khabib, I think he's destined to be the champ.
It has been overlooked, but we must talk about the co-main event. Yoani and Jacek versus Rose Namajunas 2. In my opinion, maybe the most anticipated rematch in women's MMA history since Ronda Rousey versus Miesha Tate 2, and one of the best fights that the UFC has ever put on in their women's divisions. And I have been really impressed with Yoani all week long. She seems very confident, but not overconfident. She doesn't seem to be worried about getting under Rose's skin, playing mind games. She's saying all the right things. And Rose was involved in that incident yesterday, and she was shaken up. And, for a minute, it was unclear whether or not she would fight. Are you at all concerned And when you couple how Joanna's been acting, and we know how good she is and how bad that weight cut was, and by all accounts this weight cut went great. According to her nutritionist, George Lockhart, told me it went really well. Are you at all concerned that now all the momentum is shifting towards Joanna heading into the rematch?
A little bit. I mean, at one point, that fight almost fell through because we didn't know what the status was with Rose. And I don't know if you noticed, but when she went up there and was interviewed by Joe Rogan after the face-off with Joanna, she was like, it's been a hard week, it's been a long week, and she kind of took a deep breath, and you can tell there's still something there that bothered her. Obviously, being in a bus and having 10, 15 guys throwing metal chairs and barriers and breaking windows and people bleeding, it's a pretty traumatic scene. I'm actually surprised how composed she carried, she carried herself, throughout all this, media obligations and all that. But you still have to wonder, how much does that affect? And on top of that, Joanna, as you mentioned, she's been killing it this whole fight week. She's does enough. She still has that character of herself, where she's not scared, and she'll get on your face, and she's saying the right things, but she's not overdoing it. She's very reserved. We saw it, in the open workouts. She worked out only for a little bit, didn't really show as much. And then on top of that, I was talking to Mike Brown, and on Wednesday, on Media Day, he was telling me that day she woke up only 3 pounds over. And we saw her weigh in at 114 pounds, and she looked very energetic. So I think, the momentum's definitely going for Yoani Jędrzejczyk here.
Who wins?
Everything points that Yoani Jędrzejczyk's going to take this, and I think this fight's going to be pretty interesting. But for some reason, I just have a feeling that, a gut feeling that Rose is going to pull this off. First of all, she's got Trevor Whitman in her corner, who's a fantastic coach. And second of all, she's younger. She's 5 years younger than Joanna, and I think training with Valentina Shevchenko, people might not know this, but Valentina Shevchenko beat Yoani Jędrzejczyk 3 times in a Muay Thai fight, in Muay Thai. And it wasn't only like quick knockouts. She beat her in decision. So, this is they know each other. And of course, training with somebody like that, we saw in their first fight how much that paid off. So I think, given all those situations, I think Rose will overcome the things that happened earlier in the week, but I think she'll rise again and get the victory.
Before we go, highlight one fight, a sleeper fight, if you will, a fight that obviously isn't for a belt, one that you're really looking forward to that maybe is being overshadowed by everything that happened this week.
Honestly, every single fight that I was really looking forward to is off. I mean, Anthony Pettis versus Michael Chiesa, that was a great fight. Yeah. That's off. Ray Borg versus Brandon Moreno. The winner of that could have possibly, especially if Moreno wins, could have gotten a title shot. I mean, there's so many fights that are pretty good. Even the Alex Caceres, Arts Imlova, they have very contrasting styles, so I think that was an interesting matchup. But, I think I'm going to have to go with Karolina Kowalkiewicz and Felice Herrig, just the implications that fight has. You look at it, and Felice Herrig is tearing it. I think she's on a 5 or 6 fight win streak, and over pretty solid opponents. She's been looking good. She's really resurrected her career. I think if she picks up a victory here over a former title challenger, she could very well be facing the winner of the co-main event.
Only in MMA, Danny. Only in MMA. There is no beat like the MMA beat. And if all that wasn't enough for you, after the ceremonial weigh-ins, they held this massive press conference featuring all the top fights coming up over the next few months. They announced some news. The most notable one is that the Colby Covington versus Rafael dos Anjos interim welterweight title fight had been moved to the Chicago card on June 9th. But there was some interesting, quotes and some back and forth stuff. Actually, the most notable back and forth involved 2 fighters who aren't even fighting against each other, Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington. But it was more entertainment for all the MMA fans out there. And again, sort of reaffirms the point that only in MMA does this wackiness happen. Not even in boxing. They don't take guys from below in the undercard and move them up to the title. This is just unprecedented stuff.
Like 4 or 5 times.
Yes.
When
today. It changed like 4 or 5 times today.
It's ridiculous. I mean, this is only MMA, and then on top of that, everything that was going on with Conor McGregor on the side. I mean, MMA is a crazy sport to cover, but I'm glad we're covering it. It's definitely a fun sport, and a little bit stressful at sometimes, but I mean, it's a pretty fun sport to cover.
We have no skin in the game, but I would advise everyone that if you are not expecting the unexpected tomorrow, based off of everything that happened over the past week, you're fooling yourself. It just feels like there's something in the water here in Brooklyn. I've been told that before as it pertains to like pizza and things like that, but it seems like there's just something in the water here in Brooklyn when it comes to mixed martial arts. We remember UFC 208. We remember the Mayweather-McGregor press conference that happened here, the infamous one, and of course everything that's happened over the past week. It has been an unbelievable week in the sport of mixed martial arts. Still not quite sure what exactly is unfolding, but I'll tell you what, we cannot wait for Saturday night. We will be there. for you with all our usual fight night coverage. So please do not go anywhere, and we sincerely appreciate everyone who has watched our coverage up until this point. Get a shot of all these people, Casey. Look at all these people still here. It's 8:30 p.m. on a Friday night, and they are very excited. They didn't really give me much excitement there, to be honest. It doesn't really say. There we go. Give me something. Give me something. For God's sakes. Give me I need something. That was my monster energy. Anyway, we are out of time. Thank you so much for watching our quote-unquote preview show of UFC 223. Can we get a prediction? Who's winning? Khabib?
Quinta, first round knockout.
There you go. It's kind of split, but that would be pretty insane. 11 years to the day. Matt Serra knocks out George St. Pierre. Will Ally and Quinta pull off the impossible? Can't wait to find out. We'll see you Saturday night. Enjoy the fights.